All right, hello there, AP World students. Let's keep learning about how the world has adapted to factory life. Let's check it out right here. All these new inventions changing the world. Okay, so the first thing is when the Industrial Revolution was really now in full gear, there was a few kind of dense urban areas around the Western world that became kind of the go-to factory centers. Here in the United States, it was the Midwestern states, talking about Michigan, Ohio, Indiana. They all have really great access to rivers, really great access to coal and iron deposits. And the same thing in Europe. I'm talking about central England, the areas of Manchester and Liverpool, northern Italy, northern France, and western Germany. Those will be the big industrial areas on planet Earth because, well, they've just got everything you need. You know, iron ore, coal, rivers to move stuff around. Boom. Those areas are going to get huge migrations, and they're definitely the big spots of the industrial economies at this time. All right, moving on. So let's also talk about how the industrial world diffused. So it started in England, as I mentioned. I think I said this a little bit in the last video. But after England, it went to France and Germany. Then it went to the United States. Then it went to Japan. And then to a lesser degree, Russia and Italy. I know that the College Board has this whole thing saying, like, Russia industrialized really well. I think the College Board is wrong. I'm going to put my foot down on that because I've read a lot about Russia in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Russia did get some factories, but not as many as the English, French, German, American, and Japanese. They were the kind of the major industrial players. And here's just the reality, kids. These, what are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 countries are gonna be the only countries that matter until the year like 1980. Okay, like these are the countries where just about everything is gonna get made. It's where just things are put together, and these are the countries that are now the key players on world history until we get to basically the beginning of my lifetime. Here's just a really interesting historical fact for you all to know. Between 1870 to 1940, most things said made in Europe on them. If you found any clothes, if you found any small mechanical devices, probably said made in Europe. And then the 1940s to 1980s, things are going to say made in the USA. And then once we get to our lifetime here in the 1980s onwards, things are going to say made in China. And probably before this whole list, I mean, most things on planet Earth probably said made in China. So China just sort of came back around in the year 1980. But China is going to get left out of world history real bad during these next couple units that we talk through in this class. Because China does not become a seriously industrialized economy until 1980. So there you go. But yeah, these are the major players. They're going to be coming up all the time in the history of the world for the next, 2 months of this class. All right, boom. All right, now let's talk about stock market economies. I'm a big fan. During this year of 2020, I've spent a lot of time and effort figuring out a lot of things about the stock market. If any kid has stock market questions, talk to your teacher. I think I'm pretty well educated. But so the first major stock market was this sort of split stock market between Amsterdam and London. I mean, the cities aren't too far away from each other. They can communicate a lot. Today, I think there's maybe 10 major stock markets on planet Earth. But the stock market the only one that really matters is the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street. 50% of all global stock assets are traded in New York City today. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So New York City is where it's at. And let me just explain why stock market economies work so well. It's all based on this concept called the limited liability corporation. It's if you give your money to a company and the company does well, the company does better, you will most likely end up gaining money through either your stock increasing in value or for you getting dividends. But on the other hand, let's say your company goes broke and your company owes a lot of people money. The way that limited liability corporations work is even if your company owes all this money to other people, the stockholders aren't liable. Okay, like people cannot go after a stockholder and be like, oh, hey, Mr. Brown, you own stock in ConocoPhillips, therefore you have to pay ConocoPhillips debt. It's like, nope, nope, nope. I am separate from the company. I only gain when the company gains. And if the company loses, well, maybe I'll lose the money I gave the company, but I won't take any additional negatives from it. And so that's what's really cool about this concept. And that's why at the stock market, you generally tend to make money. I mean, look, it's very possible you can lose money in the stock market, but more than often, things will get better, but it'll take a really, really long time. And I definitely recognize this sort of reality of how the stock market economics works today. It's sort of like gambling, but it's educated gambling. And the short of it is, if you believe that a company will do better tomorrow than it's doing today, you should always invest in that company. But also my advice to students, never put all your money in the stock market, okay? That could, you don't want to lose everything. Just lose what you're comfortable losing, okay? We live in Las Vegas, come on. All right, moving on, stock market economies. Okay, and sort of to go off of stock market economies, now we're getting into these really high levels of business and economics. We're talking about these international businesses that merge together and become global corporations. Corporations are when lots of little businesses come together and they all use their same resources. They largely build the same products, but they'll make the products way more efficiently and distribute them way more efficiently as well. Some of the examples of these early corporations are HSBC, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Company, and Unilever. Both of these are largely like Asian and European corporations, so I don't think they're that prominent here in the United States. But if you ever do go to Europe or China, you are going to see these companies present. And what's kind of crazy is these companies have been there for like more than 135 years. So it's it's sort of like a leftover effect of the joint stock company system. I guess you could maybe even argue that. But yeah, it's just these giant international corporations that almost have the same power and economic abilities as major governments. So pretty hardcore. And Unilever, they just sort of like sell all kinds of stuff. I mean, these are a lot of companies owned by Unilever, and they're just, especially selling stuff in Europe and Asia. All right, moving on. All right, now let's talk more about capitalism. So many economic concepts in this class right now. Laissez-faire capitalism. I'm overall a fan, but I'm going to talk about the bad things on the next slide. Laissez-faire capitalism is a concept founded by a dude named Adam Smith, wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, and you could argue that Adam Smith sort of came up with capitalism in general, and capitalism is this concept that people are going to make money, there's going to be winners and losers, there's going to be rich people and poor people in society, and that's sort of the way things have always been done in America, okay? We are a capitalist country. But what makes laissez-faire different is laissez-faire is the French phrase meaning hands off, okay? So get out of capitalism. And he's especially talking about the government. He believes that there should be a system where there's no government involvement at all in anything to do with the economy. Adam Smith would love it if there were zero taxes, if there were zero regulations on companies, if there were zero import-export laws. Adam Smith dreamed of a world where borders just didn't matter as far as it came to your economic decisions. He said that mercantilism, with mercantilism, you're sending raw goods to Europe and the goods get processed and made in Europe. But Adam Smith didn't really like mercantilism. He laissez-faire capitalism sort of said, build the factories where they're the most convenient. And if people are allowed to make all their own individual decisions and they don't have to deal with the government at all, then we will have the best possible economy that planet Earth could possibly have. This concept where you're just ignoring international borders and just trading freely with everyone, it's called free trade. There's definitely a lot of people in the world today who still believe that this would be a great system, that Adam Smith had some great ideas. But there's a lot of people that are going to say it's not a great idea, and I'll get into that on the next slide too. But I think it's just a genuine fact that if laissez-faire capitalism was a thing, the world would be more wealthy. More money would be changing hands, more deals would be made, less government involvement. So I think there is, good parts of this for sure. All right, next one. But so why would laissez-faire capitalism maybe be bad? Well, if there's no government rules and regulations, some companies are going to start doing some shady stuff. Okay, they're going to start making monopolies. And if you've ever played the board game Monopoly, you get kind of an idea of what happens. If one person owns all the property in a city, well, they can charge whatever money they want for rent. And if other people say like, oh, well, I'm going to try to buy a house there, you're like, well, no, I own all the houses, so I can charge whatever money I want. And it's not good when there's one company who owns everything. But then there are other times where it kind of is a good thing. Like I know that the government gives the power production a monopoly because we don't want to have multiple power lines going around our neighborhoods all the time. It could be kind of dangerous. So I know, like for example, here in Las Vegas, we gave NV Energy a monopoly on applying or on providing people power. But something that's coming up more and more is people like, well, we want to provide our own power with our own solar panels. And NV Energy's like, you can't do that. And it's like, well, solar panels, they're a good thing for the environment. So there's all these debates that continually are happening, whether even any monopoly is a good thing. But the other big problem with laissez-faire capitalism is when there's no rules on factory owners and these big businesses. Factory owners tend to really abuse their workers, and they abuse them bad. Well, like, for example, during this time period, if you were a worker and you got sick, like really badly sick, you could just be fired and they'll replace you with someone else. Also, if you're a worker and you get your hand caught in a machine and the machine rips off a couple of your fingers and you're screaming in pain, blood's going everywhere, your boss could come over to you and be like, oh, hey, you just broke my machine with your fingers, so I'm going to take that out of your wages and you're fired. And then you got no fingers and no job, and that would really suck. So that's also totally things that were happening back in the late 1800s. And then one more concept I want to mention that shows how crazy laissez-faire capitalism can be is the concept called the company store. I probably should have had that here as like a purple word. But the company store was something that was pretty common in these early industrial economies, where a worker would work for the company and the company would not pay them in cash. The company would have their own little coupons and say, hey, here's some coupons for you. You spend them at our company store and we will sell you food and housing and all this. But usually the prices were so marked up and so ridiculous that people were kind of stuck in progressive poverty and they could never save any money because, well, their bosses never paid them in real money. So yeah, huge problems can happen when there's no government control at all. So I think a true laissez-faire world is a bad idea, but it sort of depends on kind of like how much laissez-faire and how much government control, because there has to be a balance in the middle. And that's what I feel like we keep arguing about in modern politics to this day. All right, let's check it out. Another big problem with these factory economies was there were no rules and regulations about who could work and rules about how you provide pay for your workers. So a lot of early factories sort of said this, like, hey, men tend to be stronger, so we're going to pay men more. Are you a woman? You're going to make half the money as a man. Oh, hey, children are pretty useful. We can put them to work in some of the more complicated machines where we need smaller bodies. So they would hire kids and they would say like, hey kid, we're going to have this machine moving at full rotations. And while the machine is moving, every once in a while, a piece of cotton could get caught in the bottom. So quick, take your little hand, shove it in there while the machine's moving, and pull out the extra piece of cotton. Oh, hey, the machine ripped your hand off. Sorry, kid, you're fired. We're going to pull another kid in here. So, yeah, there were some really terrible things that happened in these early factories. No respect for workers, for kids, for women. It was really, really messed up. Okay, and with all these new factories and all these new machines, just sort of the whole organization of human society was really changing a lot. These factory societies were just making so much more stuff, and it was stuff that really didn't have too much of a functional purpose. A lot of it was like toys, decorations, excessive clothes, more and more things that people are just sort of encouraged to have and encouraged to buy. An interesting historical fact that I remember reading about was, for the vast majority of human history, the common person on planet Earth had maybe 3 sets of clothes. Okay, they had maybe 3 shorts and 3 shirts and 3 socks and 1 pair of shoes. But nowadays, I mean, can you think of a single person who doesn't have multiple sets of clothes and multiple shoes? Usually when I'm in class, I would ask a student, I'd be like, who here has the most shoes? And it's usually some female student who says, like, I have 30 pairs of shoes. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's insane. People have walk-in closets, okay? Some people have 100 shirts. Like, that's crazy. Like, it's so many clothes. So many clothes. Why do you need that many? And yeah, that's just what happens in these industrial societies. Just stuff everywhere. And because now kind of this factory system and everything's now so much more complicated than it used to be, and these new inventions require a whole lot of specialized understanding and special training, people have been encouraged more and more and more to focus their educations, to focus their careers on one path. And that concept is called the specialization of labor. And I think it's true with almost everything that we do in society, especially in high school. All you kids are encouraged to sort of make your decision now. What do you want to be when you grow up? And you're like, okay, I want to be a baseball player. Well, then you better play baseball all the dang time. You better focus so much of your effort on baseball. And you're like, oh, I want to be a scientist. Well, what kind of scientist? Now you have to specify more and more and more. You know, oh, I'm going to be an engineer. Well, a mechanical engineer. Well, a robotic mechanical engineer. And it just requires years and years of education for you to truly become a master of this stuff, because now the world is just so much more complicated than it used to be, that you're just expected to spend years of your life studying just one aspect, so then you can sort of put that specialty in the greater machine of our society. Because before the Industrial Revolution, you could get by with just, you know, maybe a middle school style education, and you could be a relatively successful member of society. There really just wasn't a lot to know. But nowadays, you got to learn physics and geometry and calculus and all these higher level stuff, so you can possibly fit one of these more way complicated roles in our society today. So yeah, and look, try to learn computer programming languages. Those will take years of your life to master as well. Some complicated stuff. The world ain't simple anymore, kids. Okay, and this new structure of society really put people into 3 different groups. You got the working class, the blue-collar workers at the bottom. These people work the low-level factory jobs, generally considered poor, typically work with their hands. Above them, you've got the middle class, the white-collar workers, the bourgeoisie. These are people who operate middle management kind of lifestyles. Most of them probably have college educations, typically don't work with their hands, but they're sort of seen as the average person in society, generally where most people should end up being. And then above them is the upper class, typically people who come from rich families, own factories or businesses, maybe make a whole lot of money on the stock market, maybe invent some things. That's how you become a part of the upper class. Okay, so I've now sort of addressed a lot of the issues that these new industrial societies have created. So workers, especially in the late 1800s, began to realize they were getting a bad deal. Okay, the working class was just stuck at the bottom. They were making $0.25 an hour while their boss was living in a mansion. And they're like, this isn't fair. So workers decided to band together, and they formed these groups called unions, which are organizations that advocate for the rights of workers. They speak to the business owners, they speak to the bosses, and they say, hey, our workers deserve more wages, our workers deserve benefits, our workers would like to have health protection if they get injured on the job. And the thing is, if the boss or the business owner decides to not work with the union, well, the workers can do something called go on strike. And a worker strike is when the workers come to the business, but they don't work there. They instead protest and shut down their place of employment. When these first strikes started happening in the late 1800s, a lot of governments actually sided with the business owners, and they sent in the military, and they killed a lot of these workers who were going on strike. So at first, it didn't look like this was a good decision. But this is where historical developments are now coinciding. Because of all these new democratic governments that the Enlightenment made, workers have more political power than their bosses do, as long as they're organized and as long as they vote for politicians and members of their government that will support the rights of unions and the rights of workers over their bosses. So slowly over time, workers' rights became more and more of an issue that politicians held up, and they started to put more and more restrictions on this laissez-faire kind of economy that allowed bosses to sort of do whatever they wanted to do. And I mean, still to this day, unions and union bosses tend to have a pretty close relationship with a lot of politicians, because union bosses say, hey, look, I can get all my workers to vote for you in the next election. And, well, I'll just tell you, kids, I have some personal experience with this. I am in the teachers union here in Nevada, and they did send me an email right before the last election saying, hey, teachers, we encourage you to vote for all these people. And, I mean, look, I could have voted for anyone I wanted to, but I generally agreed with what my union told me to do, because I mean, you know, they're going to be... My union has the total interest in protecting me and my job, and so if they tell me, hey, these politicians and these judges are people you should vote for, I'm going to just follow their advice. Yeah, the workers' rights movement totally prevailed, and over time, workers in the Western world especially, their rights are continuing to grow, and more requirements are now placed on employers if they want to try to hire a new employee. The issue that I do want to mention, though, is maybe I could argue that unions are too powerful, because what we're seeing more and more in the modern world is when there's a factory owner in Michigan, for example, and he says, hey, I want to build some stuff in Michigan. Well, the Michigan union says, well, if you want to hire anyone in Michigan, you got to pay them $25 an hour, and you got to pay for their health care and pay for these other issues. Well, if you're a business owner, you're like, maybe I'll just build my business in China, and I'll spend $2 an hour for a worker in China rather than $50 an hour for a worker in the United States. So that's what we're seeing more and more, that international businesses are getting around these workers' rights issues by just simply putting their factories in other countries. That really wasn't a choice 150 years ago, so the factory owners just sort of accommodated to the unions eventually. Okay, and now to go off the idea of unions and organizing workers, this guy comes into the game, Karl Marx, and his great idea of communism. Karl Marx was a German thinker in the 1800s, and Karl Marx and his best friend Friedrich Engels, they hated capitalism. They lived during the high points of the Industrial Revolution. They saw workers being mistreated and all those bad parts of laissez-faire capitalism, and they envisioned a very different world. They envisioned a world where all wealth could be shared, where workers could take control of the factories, where the working class would just sort of merge with the bourgeoisie and the middle class, and they would just kick out all those rich fat cats at the top. He advocated for a violent revolution, saying, hey, workers, you guys are basically serfs. Okay, when you're serving your master and only buying stuff at the company store, and you can never get out of this cycle of poverty, how is this any different than slavery? And I mean, like, look, Karl Marx, he definitely got was pretty far down the other end of Adam Smith's ideas. So hopefully the better world is somewhere in the middle. But yes, Karl Marx, his ideas wouldn't really come to play in the 1800s. They would be a significantly bigger part of history in the next century, in the 1900s. But yeah, his dream is this society where all wealth can be shared, and where the workers operate the factories rather than the bosses. So he will come back for sure. All right, and this topic will be for my final video. All right, peace out.